keeping up with everything online, it's a lot, isn't it? Trying to stay informed without getting totally swamped.
It really is.
Yeah,
But hopefully we can help cut through some of the noise today.
exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into something that, well, it's certainly got people talking online recently.
Right. We're looking at that AI-generated image shared by Donald Trump and the White House.
Yeah, that one. And just to be clear for everyone, the image shows Trump dressed as the Pope.
Wearing the white cassock, the robe, the big gold crucifix, the mitre, that tall hat.
Right, the pointed hat, and he's got his finger raised in this specific gesture.
And the timing here is, well, it's pretty significant.
It really is. This was posted during the Vatican's official mourning period after Pope Francis's funeral, which was April 26.
And just before the cardinals were set to begin the conclave, that's the process to elect the new pope,
Yeah.
scheduled for May 7th. So really sensitive timing.
Definitely. So we've been looking at reports from BuzzFeed, The Guardian, the BBC. They've covered the reactions, the statements.
Yeah, social media posts, official responses, the whole gamut, really.
So our goal here, our mission, if you like, is just to understand all these different reactions. We're not taking sides, just laying out what happened and what people said.
Exactly, trying to get the key insights from the sources.
Okay, so let's get into it. The image drops online. What happens first? Sounds like it blew up pretty fast.
Oh, it went viral almost immediately across, Twitter, other platforms, just everywhere.
And some reactions were really intense right off the bat.
Very intense. BuzzFeed actually pointed out that the response from the New York Catholic bishops went mega viral.
Mega viral. Why do you think their response specifically took off so much compared to maybe others initially?
Well, I think partly it's who they are, a significant Catholic body, and their statement was very direct. But also, like you said, the image itself is just inherently provocative, especially given the timing.
Yeah. And the language used was strong. I saw BuzzFeed mention Lawrence O'Donnell called it a photograph of deep, unrelenting perversion.
Wow, yeah. That's really strong language.
And Governor Kathy Hochul apparently called it deeply offensive.
Very clear disapproval there.
And it didn't take long for people online to start asking that question.
The what if?
Yeah.
What if Obama or another leader had posted something like this? How would that have played out?
Exactly. It really throws a spotlight on how sensitive these religious symbols are, especially when they get mixed up with politics.
Absolutely. Which brings us to the official response from the church itself. The New York State Catholic Conference. They put out a statement, right?
They did, and it was quoted pretty widely across all the sources we looked at. Very clear.
What did it say exactly?
It said, "There is nothing clever or funny about this image, Mr. President. We just buried our beloved Pope Francis, and the cardinals are about to enter a solemn conclave to elect a new successor of St. Peter. Do not mock us."
Wow. Do not mock us. That's incredibly direct, addressing him specifically.
It is. That phrase really lands, doesn't it? It underlines just how disrespected they felt, especially, like they said, with the Pope's recent passing and this really sacred process, the conclave, about to start.
Yeah, that period of, deep reflection and decision for the church. The timing just made it hit so much harder, it seems.
You feel that sense of solemnity being violated.
Precisely. And that direct address to the former president, it really shows the level of, offense they took.
Okay, so that's a very clear signal from the Catholic hierarchy, or at least a significant part of it. What about the political world? How did politicians and commentators react?
Oh, it definitely wasn't just religious leaders. The Guardian and BBC reported on former Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi. He didn't mince words.
What did he say?
Called the image shameful. Said it offends believers, insults institutions, and shows that the leader of the right-wing world enjoys clowning around.
Clowning around. That's quite a jab from an international figure. Do you think that kind of international condemnation hits differently than, say, domestic criticism?
That's a good question. Maybe it signals a sort of broader global sense of impropriety, whereas domestic stuff can get tangled up in, partisan politics more easily.
Possibly. Though there was a defense from the Trump side, wasn't there, from the White House press secretary?
Yes, Caroline Leavitt.
Yeah.
She pushed back, arguing Trump has actually been a staunch champion for Catholics and religious liberty.
Okay. And she mentioned his attendance at Pope Francis's funeral, right? Trying to provide some counter context.
Exactly. Sort of framing it as, look, this is someone who respects the faith, even if the image seems unconventional, trying to soften the blow, perhaps.
Right. And then you had others who almost seemed to lean into the, the absurdity or the humor of it.
Yeah, that was interesting. Like Senator Lindsey Graham, who's obviously a close ally of Trump,
Mhm.
he tweeted something jokey about Trump being a dark horse candidate for Pope.
A dark horse candidate. So kind of playing along with it, trying to make it seem less serious.
Seems like it. Maybe trying to diffuse the tension with humor. It really shows that split reaction, doesn't it? You've got this strong condemnation on one side, and then these attempts to either defend it or just laugh it off on the other.
It does. What does that tell you about how this stuff plays out online? That range of reactions.
Well, it suggests people interpret these things through very different lenses,
Mhm.
you know? And maybe some are trying to deliberately deflect criticism, or maybe they genuinely find it funny and connect with that kind of irreverence.
And then there was the view from someone like Jack Posobiec.
Right, the far-right influencer.
Hmm.
He's Catholic, and his take, according to the reports, was more along the lines of it just being a kind of sense of humor some Catholics might have about the whole Pope selection process.
So even within the Catholic community, not a single unified view.
Definitely not. Which isn't surprising, really.
Okay, so lots of noise online, official statements.
Right.
What about the Vatican itself? Did they weigh in directly?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. They were actually quite reserved. Yeah, the BBC reported that the main Vatican spokesman, Matteo Bruni, was asked about it at a press briefing and essentially declined to comment directly on the image.
Given how strong some other reactions were, why do you think they stayed silent? Was it strategic? Maybe trying not to amplify it?
That seems likely.
Mm.
They were laser-focused on preparing for the conclave, this huge, solemn event. Getting dragged into a political spat over an image probably wasn't something they wanted. Best to just, stay above the fray.
Makes sense. Keep the focus where it needs to be.
Right. But the criticism didn't stop there. It sounds like news outlets, especially internationally, had more to say.
Yes, The Guardian mentioned several Italian and Spanish news outlets describing it as being in poor taste and offensive, again highlighting the mourning period.
And one Italian paper, La Repubblica, apparently went further.
They did accuse Trump of pathological megalomania.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's blunt. Really shows a certain cultural sensitivity, perhaps, to using religious figures that way.
Absolutely. And even within the U.S., Archbishop Timothy Dolan, who's generally had a fairly decent relationship with Trump over the years, he commented too, didn't he?
He did. He said the image wasn't good. And interestingly, he expressed hope that Trump himself wasn't, directly involved in creating or posting it.
And he used that Italian phrase,
Brutta figura. Yeah, the BBC explained that. It means making a bad impression, looking foolish, or embarrassing yourself.
Right. So even someone often seen as somewhat sympathetic found it problematic.
Exactly,
Mm.
which is quite telling. And then, just to complicate things further, BuzzFeed reported that Team Trump seemed to kind of double down later with an AI-generated video.
Oh, really? So not backing away from it.
Apparently not, which you imagine probably just poured more fuel on the fire for those who are already critical.
Okay, let's just pull back for a second and look at the bigger picture, the context.
Yeah.
Remind us again, Trump himself isn't Catholic, right?
No, he isn't.
Yeah.
And reportedly doesn't attend church regularly.
Although, as Caroline Leavitt pointed out, he did go to Rome for Pope Francis's funeral recently.
Yes, he did attend that.
And wasn't there some comment he made a while back, sort of joking about wanting to be Pope?
Yes, that remark surfaced again in some of the reporting. Something he said, perhaps humorously at the time, but it definitely reads differently now, next to this image.
So that background, not being Catholic, the previous joke, it all adds layers to how people might see this, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's not like, say, a Catholic politician engaging with symbols from within their own tradition. That context matters to how it's perceived.
And the BBC drew an interesting contrast with another incident involving religious symbols and a president.
Right. They mentioned President Biden, who is Catholic, facing criticism a while back for making the sign of the cross at a rally focused on abortion access.
Yeah, I remember that. So it just shows how using these symbols in political or public settings is just fraught. Different actions, different contexts, different people involved, they all trigger different sensitivities.
Exactly. It's really complex.
Huh.
What one person sees as, maybe an expression of faith or even just a joke, another can see as deeply inappropriate or offensive, especially when it crosses into these really sensitive political or social issues.
So wrapping this up, if we try to boil it down, what's the core tension we've seen play out here?
Well, I think it really comes down to this clash, right, between what might be seen by some as maybe a provocative joke or even just a bit of online trolling from a political figure,
Right.
and the very real, very strong reactions about religious respect. about the sacredness of certain events in the transition, and about how religious imagery should or shouldn't be used.
And we've definitely seen the whole spectrum of responses. From deep offense, accusations of mocking religion.
All the way to defenses saying it's just humor, or trying to point to Trump's past support for Catholic causes.
Yeah. It's important for you, listening, to remember that these sources, BuzzFeed, The Guardian, the BBC, they give us a snapshot of how things unfolded and the different takes people had.
Exactly. It's a complex picture, right at that messy intersection of politics, religion, social media, and how we all perceive things.
So maybe the final thought to leave you with is this. What does this whole episode suggest about the power and maybe the dangers of using these kinds of potent images in today's world, especially when faith and politics collide online?
Yeah, definitely something to mull over.